hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I wanted to share with you all my top 5 historical fiction recommendations. So it has been a while since I've filmed a historical fiction recommendations video, but it is like one of my kind of top videos that I have filmed. I think I filmed it about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe more. So I do have some new recommendations for you all, and historical fiction is by far one of my favourite genres. I love history in general, but there's something about historical fiction that, you know, just kind of takes you back to a time, and it's just complete escapism. So I really enjoy historical fiction as a kind of like, it's equal to fantasy in my eyes in terms of like that pure escapism. So before I get on with the video guys, please do make sure you've hit that subscribe button for weekly bookish updates from me. And of course, if you are already subscribed, do make sure that you've hit that notification bell. That way you'll never miss an upload. So let's crack on with the video. I have 5 historical fiction recommendations for you here, and I hope there will be something that you will all enjoy. So my first book is actually one that I read on my Kindle. This is my Kindle. And it is The Mermaids and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower. So I think I mentioned this in a recent reading vlog, but recently I read Mermaids and Mrs. Hancock, which I think it came onto the scene like a few years ago and it was just huge. It became like an instant bestseller, like it was everywhere. But I've only kind of read it from, you know, this year. So I was completely new to it, and it is probably one of, not only one of my favourite historical fiction books, but one of my favourite books just in general. So if you're not sure about what this book is about, it is about a man called Mr. Hancock, and it is set in the 1700s in London, England. So Mr. Hancock has a quite successful kind of like shipping business in Deptford in London. And he basically owns a ship, and the ship goes missing with all the crew. So he's kind of waiting to know where this ship has gone. Then the captain of this ship basically arrives on his doorstep and says, I've lost the ship, as in I've traded the ship, but I have something even better. And he brings this dead body of this mermaid. And this mermaid is not kind of like the Little Mermaid or like these glamorous sirens that you hear about. This mermaid is like this dead, ugly, awful thing, like tiny little baby-like figure. Apparently it's really disgusting, but Mr. Hancock kind of seizes on this opportunity and displays it at a coffee shop where he begins to kind of make a profit off this mermaid. And then a corresponding plot line that joins together quite nicely later on in the book follows a courtesan who is kind of like a very respectable courtesan in London at the time. She is like one of the best, and she has quite a reputation for herself. Then when Mr. Hancock displays the mermaid at the kind of like brothel, I guess, that she works at, Mr. Hancock and the courtesan meet, and then that is when the kind of journey continues. So this is a really bizarre historical fiction novel in that it explains like a lot of detail of the time, like 1700s London, but the kind of grimier details. So kind of the world of like courtesans and brothels in 1700s England, but also the kind of more like shipping areas and the kind of like merchant businesses that are kind of running on the docks in London as well. You get a really nicely layered, you know, all-round experience of what London at that time is really like. There's also one of my favourite things, which is magical realism in this book. The mermaid is an actual mermaid. That's what you're led to believe. So at this time, it's even more special because of course people were very superstitious in those times. So this is one of my favourite historical fiction books that I've read recently, and I really would recommend if you want something magical, but then if you're craving a bit of history, this will give you everything you need to know. The next book is one that I read a few weeks ago, and it is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. This is a fiction book. It came out in January. This is the proof, which was kindly gifted to me from, I think it was from Pan Macmillan. But The Other Bennett Sister is, there's a clue in the name, but this is about Mary Bennett from Pride and Prejudice. So I struggled whether to put this in or not, because it's not historical fiction in the same way The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock is, in that, you know, it is kind of like set in a historical time. This, of course, is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, or kind of a spin-off of Pride and Prejudice, which is, of course, a fictional book. However, because Pride and Prejudice is very much a snapshot of Regency life, I thought this would be an excellent inclusion because of course this is a retelling of Mary's life and kind of delves deeper into the more introverted, forgotten sister of the Bennett family. But what this book does is really do justice for Mary Bennett. You can tell this author just has read Austen in and out because the detail is there, the writing is brilliant, but also Mary's character is become fully fleshed out that often she isn't in Pride and Prejudice because, of course, the story is about Elizabeth Bennet. So Mary is often the character that, I don't know, kind of is the downer of the family and that she doesn't really have, you know, that much of a personality. She's very introverted, very quiet. You know, she doesn't enjoy a ball, etc. But what this book does is really kind of shine a light on her, gives her a kind of hope of a happy ending, I guess. It kind of gives her a narrative. And also the details of the kind of Bennett family in this are really, really perfect. In terms of like the historical element, that's also really, really grounded and concrete, and that you feel like you're in Regency England. So I really enjoyed this. If you're a kind of Austenite and you're looking for your next hit, then this might be the one for you. So following on the theme where I'm not sure if this actually counts as historical fiction, but I wanted to include Cersei by Madeline Miller. So this is technically a retelling of Greek mythology. That's why I was like, if it's mythology, is it historical fiction? Which I think usually no, but because this is obviously set in antiquity and it is set in a world where you feel like you're living history, even though there are gods and goddesses, I really wanted to include this just because it kind of gave me the same hit as the other books did in terms of like the level of being in another time and escaping the time that we're currently in. So I would really recommend Cersei. It follows the myth of Cersei, who is kind of this woman who grows up in the house of Helios, who is god of the sun, and she is kind of deemed as ugly and she is outcast from a very, very young age. She basically becomes the witch that we all know her as in Greek mythology, but there is so much more to her story, and this is a feminist take on that. So whether or not you agree that this should sit in this historical fiction roundup, I just urge you all to read it, because in terms of the history element, yes, it's mythology, so it is a little bit different. Obviously mythology is fictional, but it is all kind of grounded on the beliefs of a historical time period. So, you know, I think it fits in all right. But I really, really wanted to include this. It is one of my favourite books ever, and it completely broke me at the end, and it gives Cersei's story a complete new light. So Madeline Miller is fantastic, and if you've not read her yet, I would start with The Song of Achilles, which is her first book, but Cersei is also just incredible. Okay, so now for a book that I've recently finished and quickly shot to one of the top spots of my favourite books list. It is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is set in kind of the late 60s, early 70s in the Carolinas in the US. It follows a girl called Kaya who is called the Marsh Girl because she basically lives alone with nobody else in the middle of this marsh. All the local townspeople, you know, she kind of becomes this urban myth, and she's kind of blamed for this horrific crime that happens very, very close to the marsh. So the reason I kind of picked this for this historical fiction recommends video is because the detail of nature at the time, of scientific discovery at the time was really interesting, because Kaya is kind of like a naturalist and she loves the marsh and she kind of like learns so much about it. I'm not going to spoil what goes on in the book, but she becomes quite an important figure in the natural biology of this marsh. Also, on the flip side of things, it's also really interesting in terms of the society at the time. So the 60s in America, obviously, a lot of people know, you know, segregation, racism, but the way this is depicted in this book is really kind of shocking, yes, but also really just, I don't know, you can see it, you can visually see the scenes, and it's so evocative of the time period. But I just found this really, really interesting. I absolutely loved the writing. The writing is beautiful. And if you're looking for a kind of emotionally charged historical fiction novel with a murder mystery, because this is at its core a murder mystery, but it's much, much more than that. I would really recommend Where the Crawdads Sing. I'm sure if you've watched my previous videos, you'll have seen that I've raved on about this non-stop, so really would recommend this one. And of course, it wouldn't be a historical fiction recommends video without me recommending some Philippa Gregory. This is The Kingmaker's Daughter, which is book 4, I think, in the Cousins War series. I could be wrong. Anyway, this book, guys, this is probably my favourite Philippa Gregory novel. So the reason why I love this one so much is because it follows the story of Anne Neville, who became Queen of England when she married Richard III. It is about her father, who is the Earl of Warwick, and he is called the Kingmaker because he basically got Edward IV onto the throne, and he holds an enormous amount of power in England at the time. This is set in the Wars of the Roses, and this all kicks off in 1465. So in terms of the history range from some of my recommendations, we've gone to almost like the modern day with Where the Crawdads Sing in the 1960s, and then straight back to Plantagenet, England with The Kingmaker's Daughter. So, as I said, this is one of my favourite Philippa Gregory novels, mainly just because I'm really intrigued by the story of Richard III and that whole mystery around his reign, especially regarding the princes in the Tower. The reason why I love this book so much, though, is because it really delves deep into the story of Anne Neville, and history has kind of forgotten her in a weird way. There is not much historical source material out there about Anne Neville. So this kind of really does an amazing job of trying to piece the pieces together, trying to help you experience what she might be going through in certain scenes of her life. There's just a unique charm about this that is so purely Philippa Gregory, because she manages to transport you back into the court of, you know, the royal family in Plantagenet, England. So this is an incredible book. I am probably going to reread this very soon because I loved it so much. And I believe I also featured this in my last historical fiction recommendations video, which I will leave below for more recommendations if you're into more historical fiction. But it's just one of my favourites, so I wanted to mention it in both. So if you've not yet read this, I really would recommend. So guys, that's it for my 5 historical fiction recommendations. I really hope you'll find something that you like in this. It's kind of a mixture of things. Also, I hope you like the look of my new background. I'm in my new house and I managed to kind of put up my bookshelves especially so I could film this video. So very exciting, and you'll be seeing a lot more of this. So stick around for more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy, please do hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up for more videos coming up. Thanks again, and I'll see you very soon in my next video, guys. Bye!